I am Nicole Bell. I'm the Executive Director for the Kern Water Collaborative. We are the management zone within Kern County to help with the nitrate control program. Next slide, please. I am going to provide an opportunity for our Spanish translation team, Linguistica, to go over the next 2 slides to let folks know what they need to do to ensure that they receive the proper interpretation in the language that is best for them.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting. Throughout this meeting today, we're going to have interpretation available simultaneously. The interpretation has already been turned on, and you can go ahead and go into that function. To select your preference language, in this case Spanish, you're going to select the globe-like icon that appears at the bottom of your screen. If you are joining by a phone, cell phone, or tablet, your options will be different. You'll have to select the 3 dots that say more options. Then after that, you're going to select the interpretation function. From there, you'll select Spanish or English, and then you'll also select mute original audio. This way, you cannot hear an echo and everything will be heard clearly. We do invite you to submit any comment or question that you may have in your preference language, and we're here to help. And now I'd love to invite you all to select your interpretation language. This way you can hear the rest of the meeting in your language of preference. And now I'm going to give the instructions now in English.
Thank you. Next slide, please. That's okay. I believe we've already covered this. Oh, maybe not. Okay. Thank you, Raina. Wonderful. Next slide, please. Right, and just a few guidelines for the meeting. If you, well, I'm gonna read through these because we don't have anybody shown by a number. You are all muted automatically, but this is a small group, so if anybody would like to speak, feel free to raise your hand. And I will, myself and the team will try to keep track of any hands raised. And we will call on you, or if you have questions at any time, you can use the Q&A icon and type your question so that we can repeat it for recording purposes and ensure that the answer is also recorded. If you do have any technical issues, you can use the chat function, and the team will be happy to help you with that. Next slide, please. For today's meeting, we will be talking about an introduction to the Kern Water Collaborative, an overview of the nitrate control program, identifying potentially impacted residents, our preliminary management zone proposal, which is due at the end of next month, and always an opportunity for questions that you may have for us. And please note, if you have participated in our 4 previous meetings, some of this information that we start with will be a repeat for you. So bear with us while we get through some things that you may already be aware of to get into the new information. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The Kern Water Collaborative does include all of Kern County. And with that, I am the only staff member as the executive director of the collaborative itself. And we do have an excellent team of consultants helping us with our technical work and with all of our outreach and education materials as well. Consultants that you will meet today are from the Ludorf and Skalmanini Consulting Engineers. Barbara Delgesh will be speaking. Vicki Kretzinger Graber is also with us this evening. And from GEI Consultants, Jackie Taketa will be speaking and presenting, and Richard Meyerhoff, who is a member of the team, is not with us this evening, but very, very much involved with the Kern Water Collaborative and the work that we are doing. We also have our public education and outreach consultants, which is the Providence Consulting Team here in Bakersfield. They are the folks that are running this presentation for us this evening, but also helping us when we hit the ground running and we're out at the community events. You will see a lot of our teammates there. And then, of course, keeping our newsletter, our email updates, and our social media moving so that folks can learn more about the organization as well as the services that we will be providing in the new year. Next slide, please. The Kern Water Collaborative is a nonprofit public benefit corporation. We were created to maintain and improve the quality of life within Kern County's 3 groundwater subbasins. We have the West Side South, Pozo, and the Kern River subbasins, or areas that Kern Water Collaborative will cover. And a small portion of the Kings County to Larry Lake groundwater basin is what I refer to as a sliver, and you see it on the map to the right as Tulare Lake. The areas that are in the pale yellow, you might see it as green on your screen, are the priority 2 areas that we are focused on. The Kern River area that is tan on the screen is a non-prioritized area that we have included in the Kern Water Collaborative so that at the time in the future that dischargers and folks in those areas are in need of a management zone to provide well testing and clean drinking water, we will already be established and be able to hit the ground running. And we expect that could be 2 to 3 years down the road. We will be establishing the nitrate contamination of groundwater. We want to address that, and then we will be providing both short and long-term processes for drinking water supplies and ensuring that folks have safe drinking water in the areas on the map that are shown. We are dedicated to engaging in the activities and our goals and getting information and input from our communities, which is why we've held this series of meetings. This is the 4th in a series of community meetings, and there was a meeting also specifically for the dischargers so that they could understand the program and what we will be doing to assist them with meeting their requirements as well. Next slide, please. The board of directors for the Kern Water Collaborative is made up of 4 officers and 7 members, as well as myself as the executive director. Next slide, please. We kind of covered these things, so I want to talk a little bit about the board. The board of directors came from a group of interested parties within various different industries within Kern County. The discussion started actually in 2021 for the leaders of the industry to come together and determine how Kern County wanted to address the nitrate control program and to address how we would meet the requirements of the nitrate control program in Kern County. That group decided that the 501c3 public benefit corporation that we have named the Kern Water Collaborative would be the best option for us in Kern County. And in June of 2022, we finalized our existence by incorporating and seating the board of directors of 11, which I had just mentioned. We've talked about our boundary, which is fairly large. It is all of Kern County, Although, as I mentioned, we will not be focusing our activities right now on the Kern River area, but we will be focusing our activities in all of the green areas. Next slide, please. And I will turn it on over to Barb for telling you about the nitrate control program.
Thanks,
All
Nicole.
yours, Barb.
Thank you. Good evening or good afternoon. I just wanted to give you some background on the nitrate control program before going into some of the other topics we're covering. Back in 2018, the Central Valley Water Board adopted a new regulation called the Nitrate Control Program. The Nitrate Control Program was designed to help solve nitrate issues in the Central Valley, and it laid out three main goals. The first one was providing safe drinking water supplies. The second one was reducing nitrate impacts to water supplies. And the third is restoring groundwater quality with the caveat that restoration has to be reasonable, feasible, and practicable. Anyone with a permit to discharge or release nitrate has to come up with a plan to address these three goals. Many of these people and entities have joined forces to create a local management zone that fosters collaborative, cost-effective nitrate solutions. Stakeholders in and around Kern County form the Kern Water Collaborative, or KWC for short, to serve the areas shown on the map Nicole presented earlier. If you are interested in learning more about the nitrate control program, I encourage you to take a look at the website shown on the right side of this slide, www.cvsalinity.org/nitrate-control-program.html. Next slide. So why do we care about nitrate and having safe drinking water? Well, back in 2012, California state became one of the first states to recognize the human right to water. In Assembly Bill 685, or AB 685, the state's legislature established the policy that every human being has the right to safe, clean, affordable, and accessible water, adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. Nitrate is just one chemical among many others that can make water unsafe to drink. Nitrate is tricky. You can't taste it, you can't smell it, you can't see it in your water, and you can't boil it out of your water. At certain levels, nitrate can reduce your body's ability to absorb oxygen. Unfortunately, there are many areas in the Central Valley that have nitrate contamination, and the only way to know if your water has high unsafe levels of nitrate is to test the water in a laboratory. Next slide. So because nitrate is such a common issue in the Central Valley, it is important to know where you get your drinking water from. If you drink water that came from a well, there are two main sources. The first is a public supply well that provides water to a public water system. Or the second is a privately owned domestic well. If you pay a water bill, then you likely get your water from a public supply well. If you get your water from a private domestic well, then you might need to take action to find out if your well has high levels of nitrate. As I mentioned, the best way to find out how much nitrate might be in your water, a sample must be tested in a laboratory. Public supply wells that provide water to a public water system are required by the state or county to be regularly tested for nitrate and many other chemicals. Public water systems are also required to provide their customers with the results of those laboratory tests in a document called Consumer Confidence Reports, which are available online at the state's Division of Drinking Water website, which I've put at the bottom of this slide. Private domestic wells, on the other hand, are not required to be regularly tested, so a well test would be needed to measure the amount of nitrate in the water. The Kern Water Collaborative is currently trying to help identify areas where drinking water might have elevated or high nitrate levels. And we're doing this in order to help locate domestic wells that might have unsafe nitrate levels. Next slide. The Kern Water Collaborative is now beginning the process to initiate a plan to provide safe drinking water to residents relying on private domestic wells that have unsafe levels of nitrate, and is dedicated to working with the community to identify solutions tailored to your needs. The Kern Water Collaborative already has growers, dairies, wastewater treatment facilities, food processors, wineries, and oil and gas representatives involved, but we need your input too. Direct input and engagement from residents about water solutions are vital for the success of this program. Next slide. So now I'll switch topics to get into some of the science behind what we're doing to identify residents that might be potentially impacted by high levels of nitrate in their drinking water. Next slide. The Kern Water Collaborative is using science to help us identify areas where nitrate is high and may be unsafe in groundwater, and translate that into figuring out how many domestic wells and residents might be affected by nitrate. We start by gathering as much data or information on groundwater nitrate conditions as we can. This involved gathering and compiling publicly available groundwater quality nitrate concentration measurement data and supplementing that data with requests to Kern County and the groundwater sustainability agencies in the area that might have extra nitrate data. We are most interested in recent conditions, so we focused on data from 2010 and on. We did some mapping to help categorize nitrate data into different well depth categories. We used a statistics tool to help estimate nitrate levels in groundwater between known data points in order to develop maps of current nitrate conditions. We are primarily focused on the upper portion of the groundwater aquifer called the upper zone. The upper zone is the part of the groundwater where most domestic wells pump drinking water from, and is illustrated schematically in the figure on the right. Next slide. We developed maps that show areas where unsafe levels of nitrate may be in the drinking water tapped into by private domestic wells. We use these maps to help identify potentially affected residents in order to make estimates about the number of private domestic wells and the population of residents located in areas with high nitrate. The state has identified a safe drinking water limit called a maximum contaminant level, or MCL, for nitrate of 10 milligrams per liter as nitrogen. We are also concerned with levels of nitrate that may not currently be over the safe drinking water limit, or MCL, but are close. For that reason, we are using the color scheme on the right to identify areas of elevated nitrate, where the red color represents areas with high levels of nitrate above the safe drinking water limit, or MCL, and the orange color represents areas with nitrate levels above 3/4 of the safe drinking water limit, or above 7.5 milligrams per liter as nitrogen. We use these nitrate level categories to help identify possibly affected residents, looking at the locations of domestic wells and public water systems, and using census data to estimate populations. Next, I'll show you the locations of known domestic wells and public water system boundaries, and also share some well counts and population numbers for each area within the Kern Water Collaborative Management Zone where we think might have elevated nitrate levels. Next slide, please. So this map shows the results of the nitrate analysis for the upper zone. This map was created using recent nitrate measurements using the steps I described for the upper zone. Again, when we talk about elevated nitrate areas, I'm talking about the orange and red areas on the map where nitrate levels are above 3/4 of the maximum contaminant level, or MCL. So namely where concentrations are estimated to be greater than 7.5 milligrams per liter as N for nitrogen. The areas of yellow and green indicate low nitrate areas. So those are the lower concentrations that we're not as worried about. We can translate those colorful shaded areas into domestic well counts and population counts of residents. So this map has some blue shapes on it that represent the locations of public water systems. And again, public water systems, the areas that are in blue, are regulated by the state or local government to ensure that they are providing safe drinking water to their communities. All of the little black dots are the locations of privately owned domestic wells in the area, which are not required to test or provide any information to residents about what is the nitrate level in those wells. Next slide, please. So combining those data sets, we can make preliminary estimates of the number of privately owned domestic wells and residents potentially affected by elevated nitrate levels. There weren't any domestic wells or residents in red or orange areas in the Tulare Lake Subbasin Triangular Sliver area up in the north. But for the west side south area, there are about 53 domestic wells that are located within the orange and red areas and also outside of public water system boundaries. Translating these areas into populations, we can use the recent census data from 2023 and see the numbers all the way on the right that there were about 650 residents living outside of public water system boundaries and within areas of possibly elevated nitrate in the West Side South area. For the Pozo area, we can estimate that there are just over 130 domestic wells that are located within the orange and red areas that are outside of public water system boundaries. Translating these areas into populations, we can use the recent census data from 2023 and see the number on the right that there are over 4,200 residents living outside of public water system boundaries and within areas of possibly elevated nitrate in the Pozo area. This information will be useful when we look toward implementing drinking water solutions in our early action plan, which Jackie will get into in a few more slides. Next slide. So now I'd like to give you a brief overview of the preliminary management zone proposal, which is the first major regulatory requirement that the Kern Water Collaborative has to submit to the State Regional Water Quality Control Board next month. Next slide. There are many parts of the preliminary management zone proposal, or PMZP for short, the document that is, that we are working on putting together for your review, actually, for a public draft prior to submitting it to the regional board. The key elements of this report are listed on the screen on the left. The first element of this report provides the background information and purpose of the document. The next two elements, the characterization and initial assessment of groundwater conditions, provide water quality and general descriptive information about each of the three priority 2 areas. The fourth and fifth key elements, the management zone participants and current nitrate treatment and control efforts or management practices of participants, provides information about the permitted dischargers participating in each proposed management zone area. The sixth element describes how the early action plan was developed. The early action plan is actually an appendix to the preliminary management zone proposal. And the last key element of the main document describes how the preliminary management zone proposal turns into a final management zone proposal. Next slide, please. So focusing on numbers 2 and 3, the characterization and initial assessment of groundwater conditions provides information for each area, including the locations of public water systems, water management entities, groundwater sustainability agencies, the locations of disadvantaged and severely disadvantaged communities, the distribution of land use, as well as all of the nuts and bolts behind the nitrate analysis that we use to help identify affected residents. The nitrate analysis includes depth-specific mapping of nitrate levels, such as the maps that you saw earlier for the upper zone, along with an analysis of nitrate trends in groundwater wells across the areas. That doesn't just focus on recent conditions, but looks more at trends throughout time. Next slide, please. The other key elements of the preliminary management zone proposal describe the permitted dischargers as well as the non-discharger stakeholder participation. In order to describe the current nitrate treatment and control efforts or management practices of the participants, descriptions of the general orders and individually permitted discharge requirements are provided. This is helpful information to understand how nitrate is currently being managed in these areas. We have been working really hard to get a public
Barb,
draft. Yes,
sorry to interrupt, but would you be able to slow down a bit for interpretation, please?
you bet. Sorry.
Thank you.
So we have been working hard to get a public draft preliminary management zone proposal document out for you to review and provide comments and input, which will be available on the Kern Water Collaborative's website. I'll note here that the public draft of the early action plan document is already available on the KWC website, and we encourage you to take a look at these important documents and give us any feedback before we have to submit them to the State Regional Water Quality Control Board next month. So now I'll turn it over to my colleague Jackie to talk about the early action plan and community participation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Barb. So my name is Jackie Takeda, and I will go over the early action plan. Next slide, please. So as Barb had mentioned, the largest deliverable, the first large deliverable, is the PMZP, or the Preliminary Zone Management Proposal. As a document that is attached to that, it's the Early Action Plan, also known as the EAP. So management zones are required to develop and implement short and long-term solutions to ensure the residents have access to safe drinking water in the areas that are impacted by unsafe nitrate levels, as Barb had showed in the previous slides. So this early action plan, it's Kern Water Collaborative's plan to test the wells and determine if they are impacted by nitrate and where those areas are needed to provide access for safe drinking water. And as Barb had mentioned, the public draft of the EAP was already posted for the public's review and comment on KWC's website back on October 25th. The bar below shows the levels of nitrate levels. And so anything above 10 parts per million or 10 milligrams per liter is considered unsafe nitrate drinking water levels and is over the state and federal drinking water limit for nitrate. Next slide, please. So for the key elements of the early action plan, there are 4 main elements that are identified. I will go in order in a clockwise position, starting with the non-discharger coordination. So this element is important because it establishes the processes to ensure that there's good coordination with the local, regional, and state agencies. The next key element is schedule and funding. We need to make sure that we've identified for the Kern Water Collaborative what the funding mechanisms are, and then also to identify those key implementation milestones in the schedule for development of the plans. The next key element is replacement water program. This has an element of testing nitrate from the domestic wells. And if the nitrate levels are elevated, greater than 10 milligrams per liter, to identify and provide replacement water options, such as bottled water delivery, water fill stations, or point of use systems. The last key element is community engagement. It's essentially the reason that we are here today, this afternoon, to go over the plan and what the Kern Water Collaborative is doing. The Kern Water Collaborative is looking to gaining local input on the plan itself, the EAP, and also to get input to identified potential proposed solutions. Next slide, please. And I will go into the more detail on the replacement water program now. So the options that I mentioned, like on the previous slide, these are all the replacement water options: home bottled water delivery, installation of a point of use treatment system in your home, also known as a POU treatment system, or the ability to visit a local water fill station to fill the water bottles. All these options are free to the residents and at no cost to you. For the home bottled water delivery option, the Kern Water Collaborative will be contracting with the bottled water vendor. The bottled water can be delivered in 1, 3, or 5-gallon water bottles monthly to the residents. The residents would then coordinate with the bottled water vendor on the delivery and also the pickup schedules. The next option is the installation of a point of use treatment system. Again, the KWC would be contracting with the vendor to install a PO unit underneath the sink where the faucet is typically used for drinking and cooking purposes. Most likely, this is usually at the kitchen sink. However, this option does require additional testing for other constituents besides nitrate. And depending on the criteria for the installation, this may or may not be a viable interim replacement water option for the resident. And then the third option that I mentioned is the local water fill station. So this is like a vending machine or a kiosk, and the image is on the slide on the right. That's an example of one, and that dispenses the drinking water. So the local water fill station does provide an all-encompassing option for the residents to obtain safe water, but this option does require further community input. So once the EAP implementation begins next year, about early March, there will be more community meetings at that time to get input to see if this is a viable option for the residents. The fill stations are connected to a public water system, or will be connected to a public water system that is currently meeting all the drinking water standards. Next slide, please. So how do you know the nitrate levels in your well? So one of the first steps for participation is to complete a program application form that will be available on KWC's website. This application will be available in English and Spanish. So one of the things that before completing the application, a resident would need to be able to confirm they can meet 3 criteria for participation. The first criteria is that the residence is in a KWC priority 2 area that Nicole and Barb had mentioned earlier where those areas are. The second criteria is that the resident has to be willing to sign an agreement with the service provider. And the third criteria is that the drinking water well has unsafe nitrate levels, which is greater than 10 milligrams per liter. And that's determined by having a water quality analysis, a sample collected from the well, and analysis conducted by a certified lab. So if the resident, you can answer yes to all those criterias, then you would proceed with completing the form online. And if the resident does not have access to the internet, you can contact the Kern Water Collaborative and a representative may be able to assist you in completing the application form. So the well test is free for residents within the proposed subbasin areas that we had mentioned earlier. If you don't know if your well water is safe, please contact the Kern Water Collaborative and a representative will coordinate a well test with you. So based on your well testing results, then that will determine the next steps on to how to proceed with the program, which is now the second half of the slide on the right-hand side. So if your nitrate results are greater than 10 milligrams per liter, that is considered unsafe, and the Kern Water Collaborative will begin replacement water service as quickly as possible. If your nitrate levels are between 7.5 milligrams per liter and 10 milligrams per liter, that's still high, but still considered safe. The Kern Water Collaborative will provide opportunity for free annual follow-up well testing, as we're aware there could be fluctuations in the groundwater, nitrate groundwater levels. If your well results are less than 7.5 milligrams per liter, your levels are considered low to moderate, and there would be no additional testing for nitrate under the EAP. Next slide, please. So now I will go into the how you as a resident can stay connected and participate in the Kern Water Collaborative. Next slide, please. So this slide goes over some key milestones for the early action plan and implementation, along with the PMZP that Barb had discussed earlier. So starting on the left-hand side, the regional board sent the notices comply to all the permitted dischargers last year on December 29th. And right now we are working on the preliminary management zone proposal, the PMZP, which also includes the early action plan that I have discussed. This document is due on December 28th, so towards the end of next month. Then the next item would be that the early action plan implementation will begin, which will be February 26th of 2025. This is when you can start requesting a free nitrate well test from the Kern Water Collaborative, and if your results are elevated, to receive free replacement water for your residents. In parallel, the technical team will be working with the Kern Water Collaborative to submit the final management zone proposal. And we're anticipating for that document to be submitted to regional board around December of 2025. Once that document is submitted, regional board will be reviewing it, and the next largest deliverable that we see would be submittal of the management zone implementation plan, also known as the MZIP. That document we're anticipating that will include a program to identify also long-term drinking water solutions. And we anticipate that document to be due in about December of 2026. Throughout all this time while these documents are submitted, and the dates on here, they're estimated based on our experience working in priority 1 areas. While these plans are being developed, as I'd mentioned, the entire time the early action plan will be moving along in parallel. And all the items in the EAP will continue until a long-term drinking water solution is implemented under the MZIP. Next slide, please. So this is the table right here goes over the various events that we have had for the Kern Water Collaborative for the development of the early action plan. The first event was held back in June 26, and that was to introduce the nitrate control program and the development of the EAP. The second meeting we had was on August 27, 28. They were both the same presentation on different days and different times to accommodate everyone's schedule. That one, we went over the nitrate control program. We identified potentially impacted residents, and we also discussed alternatives to provide safe drinking water. On October 23rd, the KWC had their third event, and we presented some more detail on the early action plan. Today, we are at the fourth and the last community meeting before the submittal of the documents to regional board, and we presented on the PMZP. We anticipate the draft. Okay. We anticipate the draft PMZP will be available for review and comment on the KWC's website. Once it is available, we ask for the public to submit the comments to the KWC by December 4th. There will be additional opportunities to provide community input on this program next year once the early action plan implementation begins on February 26, 2025. Next slide, please. So this slide provides more information and contact information. There's the link and the URL for the Kern Water Collaborative's website. If you have any questions, you can please contact Nicole Bell. And if you want more information on the program itself, there's the cvsaltsalinity.org website. And if you want to see what the Priority 1 Management Zone documents have been submitted to date, that's the link to those documents as well. If you haven't done so already, we ask that you please sign up on KWC's website so you can stay up to date on the future activities announcements and to stay up to date on future activity announcements. Next slide, please. So I'd like to thank you for attending, and I will turn the presentation back over to Nicole now.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Barb. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I thought I turned my video on. Fat fingers, missed it. Sorry. Just wanted to remind everyone that of all the presentations that we've had, both the video of the presentation as well in English and Spanish is posted to our websites, as well as the PowerPoint presentations for those meetings that we've had as well. So if you've missed any of the we've had 8 different meetings, but the information was the same. We just held each meeting 2 different times to allow for more people to attend. So that information is there along with other information regarding the Kern Water Collaborative. So we invite you to look at that. And as Jackie mentioned, to sign up so that you can stay in the know as we move forward. And to the team at Providence as well as Linguistica, thank you very much for your assistance this evening. And if anybody has questions after today's meeting, please do reach out and I'm happy to assist you in any way. Thank you for your time today, and we will see you at our next presentation.